Just before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to quickly share something that might interest you, especially if today's conversation has got you thinking about your own sustainability work. Some of the things we hear most in this industry are, I wish I could connect with other people doing this work, or I'd love to turn my sustainability expertise into something more. Well, 51 to Carbon Zero, the sponsor of this podcast, have created their own referral network. And it does exactly that. This isn't about selling you something, it's actually about helping you make money while building the sustainability community we all need. So here's what's in it for you. First, you get to join a genuine community of sustainability experts who share knowledge, refer work to each other, and solve problems together. So, no more working in isolation. Secondly, there's real money involved. There's 10% plus commission on software referrals. We're talking about projects that go from 30 grand up to 100 grand. Plus, you'll be able to boost your presence by taking part in our fireside chats. I've actually got an email in front of me from Louise Stevens, one of the ambassadors, and it says that all her clients are genuinely happy because she's got a great partner and her clients love them. But here's the bigger picture. You'll be helping accelerate the sustainability transition that we all desperately need. Every referral, every connection, every collaboration moves us closer to the world we're all working towards. If this resonates with you and you want to earn some extra income, click the link in our show notes to become a 51 to Carbon Zero ambassador. Okay, back to the show. Welcome to the Green Element Podcast, where we meet business leaders and innovators transforming their operations to be more environmentally and socially sustainable, and in the process help you on your journey of sustainability. I'm your host, Will Richardson. Today, we are speaking with Rasha Hasaneen, the Vice President of Innovation and Product Management Excellence for Trane Technologies, an industrial manufacturing company formed in 1905 that produce a range of efficient and sustainable climate solutions to buildings, homes, and transportation. This is why Trane Technologies describes itself as a global climate innovator. Rasha Hasaneen is a seasoned executive with a broad background in product management, product marketing, strategy, and planning. Rasha is also a member of the Board of Advisors for Climate Tech, a global community of innovators working to address the climate crisis. Rasha, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Will. Excited to be here.
Before we get chatting about Trane Technologies, I'd just like to know a bit more about you and particularly your journey from working in the oil and gas sector and moving into the sustainability sector. And how did that transition come about for you?
Sure. I will tell you that the transition out of digital, which is where I spent the first sort of part of my career, into back into the industrial sector, actually was driven by sustainability. And so after spending a good number of years in Silicon Valley doing software, it became clear to me that software and digital solutions have a very important role to play in climate change, but only if you can influence the industries that were driving a lot of the climate issues. And so that was at the time I was working in Silicon Valley. And that was when I decided I needed to learn more about sustainability and climate change, and started my PhD actually in sustainability. At the time, I was really interested in supply side sustainability. So at industries that were generating carbon, not industries that were generating the fuels that were generating carbon, not necessarily the industries that were generating carbon. And so I started to learn a lot more about sustainable fuels, sustainable energy production, and that's how I got into oil and gas. And my goal, oil and gas and power really, and my goal was to really understand how to generate more sustainable fuels, how to sustainably generate fuels, and really work on the supply side. and then going into more sustainable power generation. And how do you get the most out of your existing assets as you transition into a more renewable environment? My underlying thesis is it's not going to be a silver bullet. It's not going to happen overnight. So you have to make existing industries more sustainable while finding new solutions for sustainability. And while I was in that sector, I was approached by Trane. At the time, it was Ingersoll Rand, and the pitch at the time was, hey, you thought there was opportunity on the supply side. You need to come over to the demand side, because consumption of these fuels generates as much greenhouse gas and climate as the production side, but at a much bigger scale. And the whole idea was, at some point every home will have some form of HVAC or climate control system, whether it's heating or cooling. And as the climate gets warmer, that goes up. And Trane at the time was very committed to ensuring that happened in a way that was sustainable for the environment. And that is actually what drew me to Trane. And I've never looked back, because the scale that you can impact from an HVAC perspective across all of our sectors, whether it's heating, whether it's increasing ventilation, whether it's air conditioning, whether it's refrigeration of goods, all have a huge impact on the climate. And because there's so many more of them than there are power plants, if you can make a significant change in how these things operate from a sustainability perspective, you can have a much bigger impact on the planet. And that's how I made it here.
Brilliant. And so Trane makes heating, ventilation,
air conditioning,
and air conditioning units,
and refrigerators and
refrigerators. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Big industrial size, not home refrigerators, but things that refrigerate, sort of big trailers, lorries, that carry food and ice cream and, in the latest case, vaccines and pharmaceuticals.
And so from a sustainable point of view, your products use less energy to heat more or cool more, etc.
That's correct.
And is it within the product itself as well? So when you design the product, i.e. end of life, etc.?
Both. So there's a few different ways sort of cooling and heating products impact the environment. The first is really around the refrigerants that they use. So a lot of people in the residential space refer to it as Freon, but it's really the refrigerant that's being used to cool. A lot of those refrigerants, the very traditional refrigerants, have higher global warming potential, but that's what's really required for them to generate that efficiency. So it's always that trade-off between getting a product to be as energy efficient as possible while using a refrigerant that has a relatively high global warming potential. So we're very, very focused on working with chemical organizations that are developing refrigerants that have a lower global warming potential, number one. We're also very focused on reclaiming those refrigerants versus venting them. That's the second real piece of it, reclaiming them and then neutralizing them so they don't ever get into the atmosphere. The other side that we look at is really around not just the efficiency of the products and how they're designed, but the efficiency of the overall system. So while a home HVAC system may have just a couple of components, in a lot of places, home systems are mini splits or ductless systems, which are very simple. Commercial air conditioning and heating is very complex. You can just imagine if you have to centrally cool or heat a 12-story building in a large urban environment. Those are highly complex systems. So in addition to having these individual components of the system be very efficient, we look at optimizing the system itself across multiple components using advanced control mechanisms to make sure that, with the occupancy and external sort of weather conditions and humidity and all of these pieces coming together, we have the most efficient sort of systems. And then the third really big pillar that we look at, and we'll talk about these efficient systems a little further down, because with the pandemic, we've had some really interesting shifts in how we think about those systems, because they impact the quality of the air we breathe in these spaces. The third, I think, big pillar for us, what we call our sustainability pathways, is really our impact on food waste. And so our transport refrigeration business transports the world's food all over, right? They can be taking food from a farmer a short distance to a market or to a processing facility, or they can be taking tuna from, one part of the world to the other part of the world. They can also be taking pharmaceuticals, medications, vaccines, blood, plasma, all over the world. And so when we think about sustainability, we really think about how do we reduce the amount of food loss and food waste all over the world, which if we look at sort of the UN, that can contribute as much as 8% of the total greenhouse gas emissions of the world, right? So if we can improve the shelf life of food and reduce the amount of food that's lost or waste throughout the food chain, we can impact a climate change. So those are our three sort of big pathways when we think about climate. We have other smaller ones, and we're always looking at ways to innovate and further impact the world there. But those are our three big ones right now.
And how do you measure, say, the last one? I mean, that's a really hard thing to try and measure.
It is. So we are actively. So we recently announced our science-based. We recently announced that we are qualified for the second time with our science-based target. So we have algorithms for measuring the baseline of that.
Is that scope 1 and 2, or are you including scope 3 in the science-based targets?
It is scope 3 as well.
Okay, brilliant.
And the way we're looking at it is we have so we had 2020 commitments that we met ahead of our timeline. For our 2030 commitments, which we're talking about, scope 3 commitment of a gigaton of carbon reductions. We're using sort of a baseline of what the industry sort of emits now. And then we're looking at improvements over and above that. And there's sort of very sophisticated algorithms that our sustainability teams use. We have an analytics leader who focuses on that. But I think the industry overall is evolving in how we measure that. And, the more we can interconnect the value chain around food, the more we can create some of these cold chain, what we call cold chain solutions. So solutions that connect, a head of lettuce all the way from growing it to consuming it. The more we can digitally track that, the better we're going to be at measuring that. But right now, I think the entire industry is evolving in terms of how we truly measure progress. Here, I would say, our goal is so large. If we can get it directionally correct, we're going to be really awesome. But it is very much around how much longer can you extend the shelf life of food, and then you can sort of back into what that means from how much less is wasted, and therefore how much greenhouse gas can be emitted, and then you can do some things around how much of that sits with your products versus competitors' products, for example.
Okay, interesting. And so, when looking at, say, for example, air conditioning, and looking at science-based targets, do you take into consideration, because it's all about the reductions, as we know, it's basically you've got to reduce by 90%,
correct,
as a rule of thumb, and so. Do you look at, right, 10 years ago we were using this gas, now we're using this gas. In 10 years' time, we shouldn't be using any type of gas. We should be able to be ionizing air that then, I've just completely made that up. But you know what I mean? Something that's completely climate-free.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. So we have pathways using sort of, traditional technologies or technologies that we know today. And there we, our target is to get, is to get as much reduction as possible where science will let us, right? And like I said, it's always that balance. You could use, you can use refrigerants that have lower global warming potential, but you compromise efficiency. And when you compromise efficiency, you use more fossils. And so we're very, very conscious of, the grid impacts. And if I have to use more fossils, I can't just drop, my refrigerant, kill my efficiency just because, oh, well, I don't generate power. The power industry has to worry about that. No, we're very much focused on this balancing energy intensity with refrigerant impact. In parallel, my team, so the innovation team, is really looking at transformative innovation. So non-vapor, what we call vapor compression is a thermodynamic cycle we use to cool and heat. Everybody uses it, whether it's your refrigerator at home or your freezer or a big unit that's cooling Burj Khalifa, right? We all use the same thermodynamic cycle, which is this vapor compression cycle, which requires a refrigerant. We're looking at, what my team is doing is looking at emerging technologies that aren't vapor compression at all, right? That don't require a refrigerant and different ways of cooling. And so we're constantly on the lookout as soon as the science evolves and can scale. So again, things that work on small scales, they might work in your home refrigerator, won't necessarily work at scale for a large commercial building. The energy tax would be too high again, right? And so we're constantly looking at these emerging technologies that can, reduce our reliance on refrigerants. However, there's no free lunch. Let's be clear. There is no free lunch. So how do we figure out the right, how do we minimize our impact on climate? How do we get our energy efficiency down to a point where we can use renewables most of the time, right? Or 100% of the time to power these devices. A lot of it has to do with scale in these very large buildings. In our transport refrigeration business, it has to be mobile. You can't rely on it being static. So there are all of these constraints. And what we're doing is trying to really uncover this transformative innovation that's going to allow us to reduce our reliance on refrigerants while not compromising the energy impact or the carbon footprint of the device itself. And for us, our devices last so long, right, that embodied carbon is just a blip. It's always about use carbon, right? It's about the carbon, the operating envelope, right? I mean, these are, the shortest piece of equipment we make lasts 15 years. Most last 30 or 50 years. And so when you look at energy consumption over that time, our embodied carbon becomes such a small blip in that, just like with an automobile.
Back, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, Germany produced a passive office block, mm-hmm. and therefore I think it's completely energy neutral. There's nothing. They've got air conditioning, they've got heating, because everything is done within that one building. They obviously don't have air conditioning units. Mm-hmm. Now, should we? You know where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. Do we need you as an organization? Should we not be going down that route? Because actually that is more environmental, but I'm asking, that's more of a question than a statement.
Yeah. So the climate zones on this planet that allow you to create a completely passive building and allow people in the building to be comfortable. And by comfortable, I mean, we're talking about, thermal comfort. And we'll get it. This is getting a lot more now into indoor environmental quality, but thermal comfort, air quality, visual comfort, all contribute to our health and well-being when you're inside. Your productivity, your learning, your personal health suffers if you don't have certain levels of thermal comfort over extended periods of time. There's very few climate zones in the world where that can be achieved without some sort of intervention. And so, yeah, you could, if you piled everybody into, this
Germany, the
moderate
UK,
Germany, the
Sweden.
UK, not even the northern part of the US, because you need heating. You would need like the middle zone in the US. So you're in this situation, and the planet is warming. And ironically, the more it warms, the fewer of those zones exist.
Yeah.
And so the extreme, climate change isn't just about global warming, it's about global extremes. And the more you have these extremes, snowstorms in Texas, 95-degree heat in Minneapolis, those are sort of our extremes this year, right? You end up with more need. So it's this vicious circle. So we have to figure out how to create what we call life sustaining cooling without with the minimal possible impact on the planet. We have my team has a passive cooling portfolio. We're constantly looking at passive cooling technologies that further allow you to expand that scope. But a lot of these passive cooling technologies require you need to be facing the sun, and you need to have a lot of space. And it's okay, well, if I'm in an urban environment with very narrow buildings that have a lot of density, I can't get enough. But if I'm spread out in a very large sort of suburban or rural environment, yeah, maybe I can get space to do some passive cooling. And so all of these are trade-offs, Will. And really the climate zones that allow you to the luxury of having a completely passive and comfortable building are not getting more in the world. They're getting less. And so we as companies, as climate companies, have to be responsible for how we are providing this indoor environment for our customers, while caring about our impact on the planet. I mean, look, ideally, we could not drive cars and not have an impact on the planet, right? There's a lot of things we can not do and not have an impact on the planet. Those don't tend to be practical in all places in the world.
I would imagine what we're talking about actually complements each other as well, though, because if you position your building, with certain windows, certain things, but you use your technology, you're using it at less because you're using on the extremes. And it goes back to what you said right at the beginning about actually it's not just one thing; it is everything coming together.
And let's be clear, right? The ideal building has no windows.
Oh, really?
But yeah, because windows create two things. One, they create a greenhouse gas effect. So window glazing is a big thing. But two, you can't insulate a window. So you're losing heat through the window and you're losing cool through the window. But we know that our mental health requires visual comfort. We need sunshine. We need a visual sort of trees and natural environment. So we need to have windows. So now it's window glazing. So this is where it's like the perfectly tight building, has no windows, has really thick walls, right? Doesn't have the best air because you're constantly recirculating air. So as soon as you bring in fresh air from the outside, you have to condition that. So you're like breathing each other's air. So there's a lot of needs that the human body has that requires us to have these balances of, I need to have high quality, and this is where my focus is with the Center for Healthy and Efficient Spaces, high quality indoor environments that keep me as a human healthy while not compromising our goal for sustainable buildings. So making these buildings as efficient and as sustainable as possible. And it's that constant balance that makes my job interesting, but that Trane is committed to providing.
In your opinion, how big a role does the technology sector have to play in achieving net zero?
Technology is in digital technology, or technology is in innovation?
Innovation.
Yeah, big. Huge, because I will tell you, most companies that have committed to what we've committed to, so a gigaton reduction, we've got, we have line of sight to, if with everything we know today, all of the technologies that are common and mainstream today, we can't get there. So we're relying very heavily on innovating in this space. And some of it is digital technology. So can we get to a situation where AI and machine learning constantly and continuously optimizes these systems for the conditions of the weather, of occupancy, et cetera. So advances in digital technology, advances in sensing. Can I sense when I have a need for temperature? Very personal cooling, right, versus zone cooling. So that type of technology is essential, and as it continues to advance and we continue to apply it, that's going to have a huge impact. Materials technology, mechanical technology, all of these advances are going to be required. The ability to go to non-vapor compression means I either have to have some real solid energy storage, some way for materials to substitute for the thermodynamic cycle, or I have to have a different thermodynamic cycle, which is a very electromechanical approach. And so all of these every field of innovation will apply. And we're relying on the fact that technology, with the right funding, with the right focus, technology that's focused on sustainability, clean tech, is really going to enable us to go there. And we're constantly on the lookout outside of the commercial, sort of the HVAC space, for what are other industries doing? What technologies are they using to solve difficult problems? Can they be applied? So I'll give you an example. Noise reduction. So acoustics are very important to human health. It's part of our indoor environmental quality. We look to the aerospace industry, very loud jet engines. What are they using to dampen noise? And can we use some of those types of technologies to create the right acoustic profile for an indoor building, so noise is not disrupting our environments and that way I don't have to compromise the efficiency of my machine to get lower noise. I can use an acoustic material to dampen the noise and still have high efficiency machines. So things
which
like
also
that
adds to your thermal as well, I would imagine.
exactly,
because it keeps the heat in.
Exactly. So all of these innovations from other industries, we are always looking to say, okay, what are some of these proven technologies in these more sophisticated industries that we can bring in? What are they doing in space? Like, what can we learn from the space program that can be applied here to improve efficiency and reuse, et cetera? So we're constantly scanning and screening from an innovation perspective to really to figure out how we continuously improve the indoor environment while reducing our climate footprint, continuously reducing our climate footprint. Our biggest hope is that there will be technologies out there that provide us a step change improvement, like you talked about, right? Is there something that we can use that eliminates refrigerants altogether? That would be a step change improvement. But it doesn't exist yet, right? So we're constantly out there talking to inventors, talking to universities. Yeah, I'm on the board for Venture for Climate Tech, looking at new companies, looking at other industries, and then really experimenting and prototyping and piloting technologies all the time to help us balance that.
You should look at ionizing air.
So we have no we've tested ionization technology.
I completely made that up. I am not an inventor,
but not for cooling, for air quality. So right. Okay. So that's the other thing, right?
Because you can ionize water, can't you, for quality?
Yes, okay. You can. So we're looking at all different kinds of technologies, and it's a high bar, right? Because we're talking about human health for us. So we are, it's easy. What's easy is I can increase the amount of outside air I bring in. So I can bring in more air from the outside, increase ventilation. And if you happen to live in an area where outdoor air is clean, that's fantastic. You don't have to do as much filtering, but you still have to condition that air, which increases increases the energy consumption. The higher quality your filters, the cleaner the air that you're going to breathe, but the more energy you're going to use, because there's a higher pressure drop across those filters. So during COVID, we were all advocating for, and we continue to advocate for, high, what we call MERV filters. So you hear about MERV 13 or whatever, these high quality HEPA filters, right? What people don't talk about is that's a huge energy drain. And for your house, that, first of all, they're expensive and you have to change them way more often, but for your house, that's not a big deal, right? So yeah, so now I'm paying $30 or whatever, the 10 pounds. No, it's not that bad anymore, but you're paying a lot more for a filter and you're changing it more often, but then and you're paying a little bit more for electricity, but that multiplies, right? If every house in the country, every house in the world were to increase their filter level and increase the amount of times they open the window, right? Or of the amount of outside air they bring, it would blow up our greenhouse. We would be using so much electricity, let alone for these huge buildings, right? These are huge amounts of cost. 30 to 40% is what we've seen through the pandemic. And so we've got to innovate. We've got to find ways of being able to recirculate conditioned air in order to really keep that global sort of that greenhouse gas footprint down while continuously cleaning that air so that you're not recirculating bad stuff, right? And that's really the nut to crack, right? So we've introduced some innovations. There's so much more work to do there, but what I think the pandemic has done is it's really raised people's awareness around, hey, look, the air I breathe matters, right? And so now I want to have really good quality air, but I can't afford to do that forever with the current technologies. So we're on a quest right now to really understand what the best technologies are for air cleaning, for purification, so that we can provide those solutions. We know the tried and true, and that's what we're providing to our customers today. And what we're trying to do is really introduce new innovation that allows us to really to provide that air quality while bending the curve, continuing to bend the curve on climate change. And one of the things that we learned through this process is, if you look at just cold and flu, right, through the pandemic, because of all the safety measures we've taken, cold and flu cases, at least in the US, are now so low the CDC can't count them. So it went from like 40,000 deaths a year, 500,000 cases, to under 3,000. And by the way, if you go to the CDC website, it goes, we think it's under 3,000, but it's so low it's hard to count. And so now we've learned that I don't have to deal with a flu season that kills 40,000 people a year, at least in the US. Now, but I don't want to be wearing a mask all the time, and I don't want to use hand sanitizer all the time. But there are measures we can take just with indoor air quality, right? That can help us reduce allergens inside our homes, inside our buildings, reduce transmission of communicable diseases. There are technologies we can use to do that. Now, our goal is to uncover and mature those technologies that allow us to do that without compromising energy efficiency. That's the nut to crack.
Yeah. What drove you as a large organization? I'm just fascinated to know, what are the drivers behind it? Because why isn't everyone in your industry doing it?
It's hard to say why everyone is in our industry isn't doing it. What I can tell you is why we're doing it. So
yeah.
Sustainability is at the core of Trane Technologies' purpose. It has been for the last 10 years. So when we set our 2020 targets, it was core to our purpose. And our previous CEO and now our new CEO are committed to climate being at the core of what we do. And the reason we do that is because everybody in the company, and we run very large innovation contests across the entire company, but we've built a culture where everyone in the company is committed to providing these, life-sustaining cooling services without compromising the planet. The planet is important. So everyone I talk to, is incredibly focused on climate and the impact of the built environment on climate. And so someone's got to do it, right? The industry has to change or get disrupted. And for us, the core, the purpose, our purpose as a company is to do that. And so, at the end of the day, everybody, all industries are going to have to embrace climate change, right? And they're all going to have to figure out how they're going to do their part. We're just choosing to do it first, right? We just don't feel it's sustainable to continue to go on our current trajectory. So whether it's attaching, reducing, distributed heating sources, attaching more sort of higher efficiency electric heat to the grid, and then focusing on grid decarbonization, whether it's energy efficiency of our systems, whether it's looking for refrigerant alternatives, whether it's reducing food waste. Those are all things we can do to change really the world and continue to allow the world to develop, right? And to have those services in a way that's sustainable, right? Again, we can all go back to, we can all not drive, right? There's a lot of things we could deprive ourselves of, right? To get to a more sustainable world. And then there are ways to innovate to give us, those levels of comfort, those services that we need to really thrive as a civilization without compromising the climate. And that's what we're really focused on.
Our listeners are running businesses.
Right.
They are looking at probably technologies like yours to install into their buildings. I mean, other than the obvious, install our technologies. What sort of things would you want the listeners to be looking at and doing?
There's a couple of things, right? Your listeners need to understand that there are that there are alternatives, right? So be mindful as you're, typically the HVAC, even in our homes, is the last thing we think about, even though it's the biggest component of most of our electricity bills, especially if you have central air in your home, right? Businesses are not different, right? HVAC is a huge component of their utility bills, but not just that, right? When you think about businesses that serve clients, when you go into a store to purchase something, how you purchase is highly dependent on the environment you walk into. And you see a lot of work being done on lighting and display of merchandise. And there's so many studies to that. What I would say is to your listeners is be mindful. Be mindful that you can make small changes in your indoor environment and really impact your clients, number one, but number two, really impact your carbon footprint. And so just increasing the energy efficiency of your system, a lot of businesses may not have control over their facilities, right? They may be renting or leasing a facility. Well, there are things you can do even in your space to improve your indoor environment without having a huge impact on climate. You can understand from your facilities, from your facilities managers, what they're doing to ensure you have a high quality environment, high efficiency. You can, I would say, ask the question as you're looking to lease space. And the question is, ask the question of the HVAC system, ask the question of the indoor environment, ask your facilities managers, right? Help me understand. Put in monitoring devices. We sell monitoring devices. There are great monitoring devices on the market today. Monitor your indoor environmental quality and then understand what your facilities teams are doing to make sure those indoor environments are high quality, and what are they doing to ensure that the energy consumption isn't skyrocketing as a result. That's really the deal. Now, if you do have full control over sort of your entire facility, you own the facility, or you are in the building management space, look for those solutions that provide the balance of high quality indoor environments and energy efficiency. The pendulum's going to have to swing back post pandemic. We can't afford to pay these energy taxes that we have been paying, but there are solutions. And so have an open mind, ask the questions around safety and efficacy of these air quality solutions and the energy intensity of those. Don't forget to ask about energy intensity, right? When you're thinking about those solutions for yourself, understand the energy intensity and the footprint of what you're doing, and drive all of us in the industry to be better at helping you understand that, because that's what's going to make us better as an industry, is when consumers are demanding that of us. If they don't demand it of us, it's very hard for us to justify continuing, right? With us, we have a purpose. We continue to do it. We need everyone who's thinking about, facilities, buildings, et cetera, to be thinking about the most environmental solution, because we need the industry to get better. We all need to be better at it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for today. I've got one. It's been so interesting. I could carry on for ages listening to you and talking to you about what it is that you're doing, because it's such an integral part of running a business and running organizations, whatever it is, from manufacturing to office space to,
Yes.
To everything. And it encompasses everything around us as well. So it's, what we put in our bodies, what we drink, what we, it's brilliant. And it's lovely to hear a company that isn't greenwashing, that actually is doing something. And, you can read between the lines. And sometimes, sadly, I've done these podcasts and I can read between the lines. I've been doing this for long enough that I won't call someone out on a podcast, because I don't think that's fair to that person. But I think the listener can come to their own conclusions on the questions I've asked. But I hope that, I know that the listener will understand that you guys are doing it. And we've actually got a podcast special coming out on organizations that are trying to reach that real net zero science-based targets, obviously included in that. But what are you doing as a business to get to real net zero by 2050? And I believe that you're one of those companies that are truly forging the way for others. It's going to be a really hard journey. It's not going to be easy, this.
It is, and it's always a pleasure working for a company that sort of walks the talk. I know I didn't talk about our scope 1 and scope 2. That's not my wheelhouse, but we do. Any one of your listeners can go to our site and look at our scope 1 and scope 2 commitments as well. But I will tell you, I have worked for companies that greenwash, and I've not loved it, right? Because this is kind of what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So this is what I love about working also for Trane, for Trane Technologies it's amazing to be surrounded by people who this is at their core, and by a leadership team that is focused on this at our core. And so you're absolutely right. It is, it's not just great to listen to, it's great to work. It's great to work there as well. It's great to be innovating in this space and be encouraged to continue to innovate in this space as an employee.
Can I finish on asking you what you think your business superpower is?
Our business superpower is our purpose-driven culture. It absolutely is. I will tell you, having lived through this last year and a half with the pandemic, where it's airborne, it's not airborne. Oh, it's airborne and HVAC makes it worse. Oh, it's airborne and HVAC doesn't. Like, so much sort of noise in the marketplace. What I love about our company is really how we came together in this pandemic to really help our employees and our customers. I mean, the pandemic, COVID was declared a pandemic from the US in March. By the end of March, we had measures in place for business continuity, for keeping our employees safe. We had employees in China procuring, because they were ahead of the US, procuring PPE and sending it to our plants in the US. Within 3 weeks of just making sure our employees were safe, that we could get back to work safely, we had all the measures in place, all the PPE, all the procedures we needed. We had convened a cross-company group to understand how we help our customers. And we scoured our portfolios around, because we had been working on indoor air quality for years in pockets across the organization. We brought a huge cross-functional team together. We were sharing experiences. Products were being exported from the US to China. China was identifying partners in China and then taking the learnings back to the US. We were launching product. We were repositioning product. We were going out to our customers and helping them, optimize their HVAC systems for unoccupied spaces. We were helping them put procedures in place for reoccupying places. We were helping them upgrade their systems. We were assessing their systems and what they've been doing. We found a lot of companies that hadn't kept up their maintenance, that their air quality wasn't great. Like we were helping them come back, and it was all in a matter of weeks. And the whole company rallied around helping our customers be as sustainable and come back to work as quickly as possible. And then we launched the Center for Healthy and Efficient Spaces because we knew that the pendulum swings and that energy efficiency goes out the window. We couldn't let that happen. We needed to keep energy efficiency front and center as we were coming out of the pandemic. A culture that is not purpose-driven and focused on the customer and focused on really making the world better would not have been able to come together that way. And that is, in my opinion, really Trane Technologies' superpower is a culture that's purpose-driven around sustainability. And if you fit there, you fit there, right? And that's kind of what I love about Trane.
Brilliant.
Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Rasha. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Sustainable Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's content, why not join our post-podcast discussion in our online community at sustainabilitysolved.org. We will be sharing ideas and collaborating on technology and sustainability with our members. Join now and find a space to collaborate with like-minded professionals, learn more about sustainable business, and inspire others to become more environmental. We also have an important update. We will soon be changing the name of this podcast to Sustainability Solved to better reflect the content of our podcast. You will still be able to access all our original podcasts on your preferred platform. And if you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you get every episode, and don't forget to follow Green Element on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So you really enjoy sustainability and want to be a part of the solution? Come and join our vibrant community now. Book a call and we can talk more.